Welcome to the Hillsdale College Online Courses Podcast. My name is Jeremiah Regan, and I'm joined today, as always, by my friend
Juan. And we are back with Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. On to lecture number 3 today, Christmas Past, His Poor Forgotten Self.
So in the last lecture, Scrooge encountered his first apparition, the first ghost, and I reflect that while the ghosts are inherently scary and disconcerting, it's also kind of hilarious. There's a dash of humor in the way Dickens presents this. It takes a supernatural exposure, some horror, to get Scrooge away from his books, away from his calculations, away from his ledgers, to think about things that many ordinary people would think about normally, reflections on past decisions and contemplation of what that has given him and what it's cost him and how he should move forward.
Yeah, and at least, in my own life, I can look back on times where I've had moments that seem at least too much to be coincidences, either for good or bad. Things that were great that happened in my life that you're like, well, that's not a coincidence. And they do, or things that, are tragic. And you do look back and think about the choices that you've made, the decisions that led you to that point. So I think whether, you are somebody that reflects on those things or not, it's good to reflect on those things. And that's what I think Charles Dickens is getting here. You need to look at your past. You need to look at the choices that you've made that have led you to your current circumstances and that have led you to the person that you've become today.
Yeah, Professor Lindley characterizes these flashbacks, if you will, these visions of the past as Scrooge rediscovering his forgotten self. And he's taken these painful memories and chosen, instead of learning from them and allowing them to direct his future decisions, to ignore them. He created a hardening, he hardened his heart in a way and focused on ledgers instead of people, because he'd been hurt in relationships.
And that's something that we see in a lot of our courses. We don't see it just here. Here at Hillsdale, we talk a lot we read a lot of Aristotle and Aristotle's Ethics. And we learned there that the choices that you make form your character, they form your soul. And so you are, in a sense, the product of your choices.
And there's hope in that, because we can continue to choose. Even if we've built a habit that isn't proper or isn't the best, we do have the agency to change the course of our life. And that's what Scrooge begins to recognize, and we see in this lecture. I have a funny anecdote for you. We work very hard to make our courses beautiful and engaging. We try to match the beauty of the content with the beauty of our video and audio production. And one of the gentlemen, and I can't dox him because it will embarrass his wife, but one of the gentlemen who works with us on making the videos told me his wife was at a small homeschool group, and she heard some of the other mothers talking about our children's literature course and how much they loved it. And they just wished Hillsdale College made more online courses. They didn't realize that we have over 40 online courses on our platform. The wife of the gentleman who works with us did not correct them and say, oh, by the way, my husband was the director on that course that you really like, and you should take these other ones. But this story reminds me to tell you, we have over 40 courses on our platform. You should go check it out, online.hillsdale.edu. That's online.hillsdale.edu. You can access every one of the courses we've made on topics like Christmas Carol literature, politics, religion, fine arts, and continue to learn with us.
Now let's turn to Dr. Dwight Lindley and Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, lecture number 3, Christmas Past, His Poor Forgotten Self.
Welcome back. We're here now for Stave 2. This is going to be the Ghost of Christmas Past. We should remember, though, that what we just left behind in the last stave was Marley's ghost, the first haunting, who came to him because he wouldn't listen to the actual flesh and blood humans in his life. Marley came, and Marley has brought about the next 3 ghosts we're going to meet now in the next 3 staves. So with that, we open the door to the Ghost of Christmas Past. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. So we got this suspense, waiting to hear what time it is. He knows the 1 o'clock hour is the one that's going to be pivotal for him. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have got into the works. 12. So the clock has gone back 2 hours, apparently. He touched the spring of his repeater, his watch, to correct this most preposterous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12 and stopped. "Why, it isn't possible," said Scrooge, "that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It isn't possible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon." Okay, so he's incredulous. Why? Because he's not in control of time. He is used to being in control of time. You measure with the clock, you break it up into pieces, you understand the whole thing, you pay it out as you wish, you're in control. But what this visitation, which he's now beginning to undergo, is forcing him to admit is he's not in control of time. It is rather steering the ship, right? There are powers beyond him that are in control. He hears the last striking of the clock, the hour itself, said Scrooge triumphantly, and nothing else. He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. So he's got a 4-post bed with curtains all around it. Now notice the same phrase is repeated verbatim in the next paragraph. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. So we get that dramatic repetition of the phrase, the curtains of his bed were drawn. Why? Because again, you can hear Scrooge trying to steady himself in the midst of his fear. Also notice what's called the passive voice here. The curtains of his bed were drawn rather than the ghost drew them aside, right? If you say the ghost drew them aside or drew them apart or whatever, then you've got a clear actor in the subject line of the sentence. Here, the curtains, the object is first in the sentence, were drawn, a passive version of the verb, so that the actor is not immediately clear. That's important. The actor, the ghost himself, is withheld. We just see the action that's happening. That's actually scarier. That's more suspenseful. And drawn aside by just a hand, right? Also very mysterious. We don't see the whole person yet, just a hand. These are the kinds of things that Alfred Hitchcock could learn from, right, in the next century. Not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, but those to which his face was addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside. Repetition of it again. You can feel the fear, right, in the narration. And Scrooge, starting up into a half-recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them, as close to it as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. Wow, creepy moment. Dickens is apparently next to us right now. He's haunting us also, apparently, in this book, I guess, just like this ghost is haunting Scrooge. Okay, now we get this paragraph-long description of the ghost of Christmas past. This is a very strange description because it's so bizarre, it's weird. This ghost looks both old and young, right? It's a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. What? So we've got an old man / child phenomenon. So he's old and young. He's dressed in holly, which is a mark of the wintry time, but also trimmed with summer flowers. So we got winter and summer together, old and young together. He's also got strong, kind of sinewy arms And yet there's also this kind of softness to him, right? So he's both muscular and tender or something. And he's also just generally changing. You look at him and he's like a shapeshifter. The strangest thing is that this ghost is continually changing his appearance. For as its belt sparkled and glittered now in one part and now in another, and what was light one instant at another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, becoming now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. And in the very wonder of this, it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever. What is happening? Why is this ghost this way? Who and what are you? Scrooge demanded. I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? No, your past. Interesting. So somehow this old and young, shape-shifting, continually changing, old and young, strong and weak character of this ghost, somehow this is meant to image the past. The past is something like this. It's something you look back and it's always changing as you look at it. This makes a kind of intuitive sense. You look back at past versions of yourself or past times in your life. They actually do change as you get older. You get more experience. You reframe the past in various ways. So the past is changing in that sense. The other thing we should see is that this is time itself coming to Scrooge. It's his own past walking into his present. That's what's happening. It's your past that I am. Strange. Like, what does that even mean, right? But it's happening. Why is this ghost here? For your welfare, said the ghost. For your reclamation, he says. These are strong words. Just like Marley, he's here for Scrooge's good. Scrooge says, I don't need your help. Your reclamation, then. To reclaim him, that's what reclamation is. He's going to reclaim him in some way by giving him an experience of his past. Rise and walk with me, he says. There's a little gospel allusion there, right? This is something that Christ says to cripples. Rise, take up your mat and walk. And so there's this sense of, obviously this is a supernatural visitor, but there's also that sense of kind of divine healing here in what he's bidding Scrooge to do. They walk right through the wall and end up in this rural setting out of the city. And it's a setting, of course, that Scrooge grew up in. Immediately, Scrooge recognizes things. You recollect the way, 'cause they're on a path. Remember it? Cried Scrooge with fervor. I could walk it blindfold. He's excited immediately by recognition. Strange to have forgotten it for so many years, observed the ghost. Let us go on. And they walk up the road. This is a path of memory for Scrooge, so it makes sense that the spirit would be asking him about recollection. It's a time where Scrooge is remembering things that he has not remembered for many a year. He has been systematically distancing himself from his past. That's why it needs to come back into his life. That's why it has to be forced back into his life. This is not a visitation he wanted. He did not ask for this. It is being given to him, and he needs it. He hears the voices of people that he knows. The jocund travelers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named them, every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted at crossroads and byways for their several homes? These are nameless figures that he has distant recollections of, but he has this feeling of joy on reconnecting with them, even in memory. The important thing is that he doesn't know why he's enjoying this, right? He's being made to wonder at the remnants of his old love, which is down there. As C.S. Lewis would later say, he's being surprised by his own joy here. Joy at these human connections which are real and still attached below the surface of his consciousness, of his conscious awareness, below the surface of the story that he has been telling himself about himself. Those are still there. They're being awakened, stirred up now through this encounter. Okay, as we know, he's drawn then into the schoolhouse where he's going to find an early version of himself. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to a door at the back of the house, this lonely schoolhouse in winter. It opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he had used to be. He has not been back to visit his former self in many years. He doesn't remember, he hasn't conceived of his childhood self as an actual other, that person over there that I was, and gone back to visit that person. But there's something really profound about this, because this is a voyage, this is a journey that many adults make and have to make still today, back to a place where you encounter your former self and make up with that self, or get used to what happened back there, or encounter the difficult truths of the past. This is what trauma, people getting over trauma have to do. This is what people of all kinds have. This is just part of the business of life and an adult life. So he's going back, and he is feeling things, right? He doesn't normally feel things, Scrooge. He's got to feel sympathy, and he's got to feel love for this previous version of himself. That's what is happening here, and it's something that he needed somehow. The spirit touched on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly a man in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck in his belt and leading an ass laden with wood by the bridle. "Why, it's Ali Baba!" Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy. "It's dear old honest Ali Baba from the Arabian Nights." Yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child was left here all alone, he did come, for the first time, just like that. Poor boy." And then he mentions other literary characters that the boy read about in these tales. This is really important. On the one hand, the boy gets to actually, in a certain sense, escape into an imaginative terrain out of the difficulty and loneliness and isolation, abandonment, we could say, of his life. So that makes a kind of sense, but it's also important here for the older Scrooge to remember the imagination that he was capable of in previous years. Why? Because this is the kind of place that he's being bidden to himself. This is all an act of imagination for the older Scrooge. He's being led outside of himself to imagine other people and get inside their lives and care about them. That's something that only fancy, as he said earlier, can do. It strikes me that part of why this is the first stop with the Ghost of Christmas Past is that he needs to learn to love himself and remember how to love himself, reattach those connections to his former self. He needs to learn that first before he can go to others, because you have to love yourself in order to love others, right? Again, you can think of the gospel maxim, love your neighbor as yourself. To give to others, you have to be able to already give something to yourself. So there's a kind of pathway of development here.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding, and we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
Okay, let's pass on from this childhood scene to the scene of his young manhood when he is working for this Mr. Fezziwig. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. "Know it," said Scrooge. "Was I apprenticed here?" They went in at sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he had 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart. It's Fezziwig alive again." Okay, so notice him blessing Fezziwig's heart. That language of blessing, there's a kind of religious tinge to that, but it's also just a basic instinctual mode of affirmation. This is good. This guy is awesome. I loved this man, right? This is beautiful. So he's being kind of drawn out just reactively to say, this is awesome. This is beautiful. Yes. To say yes to it, in other words. Then he sees his own former self, a couple paragraphs down, and Dick Wilkins, this guy he used to work with. "Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear." So having those feelings stirred up, and now they're going to clear away the office materials and set up for a party. They set it up for a ballroom, and they have a fiddler, they have Mrs. Fezziwig and her attractive daughters, and all of these other young people, notably poor young people, people working class, people with no place else to go. There's a kind of motley character to this party, but it's very warm and fun and full of dancing, and Scrooge is drawn into it. But if they had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, for all the rest of the dancers. And so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. We should say they're doing a kind of country line dance here, where everyone is in a big ring or something, or perhaps 2 lines, and everyone is engaged, and they move to the top of the line at a certain point. These are kind of party dances from that period. So the Fezziwigs have this kind of, they're dancing better than everyone else, I guess, even though they're the older folks in the room and kind of large, right? They're bigger figures. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. This is a strange moment, but listen. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would become of him next. Why on earth is he talking about this man's calves? What does this have to do with anything? This is, anyway, just like a surprising and sort of hilarious, even bizarre moment in the narration. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, hold hands with your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again without a stagger. This is you jump up in the air and move your legs around somehow. It's called cutting. Well, okay, which is not what you would expect from a big man, but he does it. Why are we seeing this? This, in a way, is the heart of this scene to my eye. Because it's the glory of calves. Calves are they have to be one of the least important parts of the human body. There's something, they're just there. You don't even normally think about them. Why are we being made to hear about them here? And why are they being compared to moons, right? These are unpredictable calves. You never know what he's going to do with those calves. I mean, I'm belaboring the point to say that there's something gratuitous and silly and awesome and even kind of wondrous about this absurd, meaningless part of the human body, which attains a kind of glory in this dance. Because it's the little things that matter, that are revelatory. Little things that don't matter. That's the point, in a certain sense. This is what Scrooge needs to see. He needs to be drawn outside of himself to pay attention to little things that don't matter. All of these people that are here, they are little people that don't matter. They're the poor, the weak, the strange. Fezziwig's calves also don't matter, but Dickens seems to be showing Scrooge that the capacity to love and see the light that emanates from these calves is the capacity to be open to the beauty of reality, right? And the kind of gift of reality. So I think, in a funny way, the sort of strange particularity of this is really goes to the heart of what Scrooge is being drawn into here. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene and with his former self. He's a man out of his wits. So not literally insane, as we would say, but out of himself. That's really important. Ecstasy. What does ecstasy mean? Ecstasy means ekstasis in Greek, means standing outside of yourself. So he is being drawn out of himself in this whole scene. That's what going out amongst your fellow humans, that's what it means. It means not just locking yourself in, but emerging out. That's what has been happening this whole Fezziwig dance scene. His heart and soul were in the scene and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burnt very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude." So the ghost is sort of testing Scrooge, blowing it off a little bit. "Oh, I mean, this is kind of silly, isn't it?" "Small," echoed Scrooge. "Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money," says the ghost. 3 or 4, perhaps. "Is that so much that he deserves this praise? Right, this party didn't cost that much. Why are we all so excited?" "It isn't that," said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. "It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." It's good to read, to hear that, because what the elder Scrooge is now being led, drawn out to admit, is that happiness, as his nephew knew in the previous stave, is not a matter of addition and subtraction. It rises up above any factors that you could use to explain it. It's greater than the sum of its parts. There's something gratuitous, additional, graced, as we might say, about it. Another way to put it, happiness is immaterial, right? It's not a matter of material counters. It's something that arises above and beyond that. It's very mysterious, right? And he realizes this man, just by doing this and that, these little things, these little nothings could make us happy. Obviously, Scrooge needs to realize that again. And we move on to the third section of this stave. Let's look at that for just a few moments now. So now we're seeing Scrooge not as a child, not as a young man or a youth, but as a fully mature man, right? But a younger version of his self. And this is his self at a time that he was being left by his fiancé. There's this woman, Belle, to whom he was engaged, at one point. But here she is separating herself from him painfully. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a morning dress, in whose eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. It's important that the ghost of Christmas past sheds light wherever he goes. He's illuminating things. He's giving Scrooge intelligence. "It matters little," she said softly. "To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve. Something else has gotten in the way of her. It's an idol. It's not real. It's not a real object of love, but it's taken that place. It's usurped that place." What idol is that? A golden one. Of course, we're thinking of money. He's becoming a greedy person, as we all know. But I think we can see a little bit more here. "This is the even-handed dealing of the world," Scrooge says. "There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth. Everybody criticizes wealth, but, who wants to be poor? Fair enough, right? But listen. You fear the world too much," she answered gently. "All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not? It's not just bare greed for greed's sake. Underneath it, there is a fear. You fear the world too much, what it can take from you, right? How it can hurt you, how it can make you vulnerable and put you into an uncomfortable place that you don't want to go. He wants to be in control. That's the reason that he wants to accumulate and protect himself with his piles of gold. It's that desire for control and for the total avoidance of all unwanted situations. That's what undergirds Scrooge's isolation and his move into the self, his losing himself and losing other people as well. That's important. She releases him from the engagement that they've had. And what reason does she give beyond what she's already said? She says, you have changed. You have a changed nature. You have an altered spirit. In another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. You have changed to having a kind of different goal of life, a different purpose, a different thing that you're aiming at. Everything has changed for you. He's being made to admit all of this, of course, as he sees it. The last scene now that we see is that same woman, but with her own family that she gains a few years down the line. And the important thing here, so we've got a different father of the family. We have children. Scrooge is being made to see what he could have had, but has not had, right? The road not taken. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever. When the master of the house, this is the man whom Belle actually married, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside, and when he thought that such another creature quite as graceful and as full of promise might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. This is the moment where he's most tormented. He says at the bottom of the page, "Spirit, remove me from this place." In a broken voice, he says this. "I told you these were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "That they are what they are. Do not blame me." "Remove me," Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which in some strange way there were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it. So this is remarkable, first of all, because he's looking into the face of this ghost of Christmas past. All of the faces that he has just seen. His childhood self, his youthful self, Fezziwig, Belle, all the people, they're all kind of changing on the face of this figure of the past. and he is now wrestling with this figure. This is a supernatural being that has come to bless him, and he is wrestling with it. This is an allusion to the book of Genesis, Jacob wrestling with the angel. All night Jacob, in this strange passage in the book of Genesis, wrestles with an angel who who actually sort of wounds him. Jacob doesn't exactly win, but he does leave that night with a blessing from this angel. So it's a very mysterious thing. Something like that is happening with Scrooge. He's wrestling with this spirit in order to get it to shut up. Right? I can't take any more of this. Leave me, take me back, haunt me no longer. In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light, this is the light coming out of the top of its head, was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap. This is the ghost cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down on its head, and then the ghost is done. Okay, so there's this strange, almost kind of comical ending here, and he falls exhausted into bed, ready for the next visitation. One final thought about this. What has happened here, as I said, is his past has walked into his life, into his present, and forced him to establish relations with it. These spirits, so far, these memories, are revealing Scrooge to himself as a historical creature. He has had the luxury for years of living outside of time, living in his locked-in present moment where he's only aware of himself, doesn't have to take anybody else seriously. Screw all you guys. Right? The name Scrooge, by the way, it's a made-up word. It has the word stooge in it. It also has the word screw in it, because he's like screwed up and tight, right? But also because he's willing to screw other people over and so on. He has had that luxury of being inside of himself. He's brought out into his own history and forced to admit himself as a historical character. Why does that matter? Because a historical person changes over time. He has just seen that happening in his own life. Why is it important that he admits that to himself? Because he is still a historical character, which means he can still change over time. He still has the capacity to become someone that he is not as yet. And that is what he is being called to do. All of these visions are calling him to become someone. And we'll leave it at that. The next stave will be the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Hillsdale Online Courses podcast. If you want to continue learning about A Christmas Carol or other topics, please visit hillsdale.edu/course. There you will find over 40 free online courses, including the history of classical music, Paradise Lost, Theology 101, and many more. The courses include additional readings, study guides, fully produced videos, and you can chat with your fellow students on a dedicated forum. Upon completing a course, you will also get a certificate. All our courses are free because we believe that a virtuous citizen is the best defense for liberty. So pursue the education necessary for freedom and happiness at hillsdale.edu/course today. That's hillsdale.edu/course. Thanks for listening.